Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us on our inaugural session of Think Thursdays. We are very excited to bring this content to you, and we hope you're all staying safe and healthy wherever you are. ThinkLA is the premier association for the Los Angeles advertising, marketing, and media community. It is our mission to connect, educate, and inspire. On behalf of our entire team, our board, and our volunteers, we are incredibly grateful to have you here today. This is the newest way that we're able to continue serving the industry and our community. A reminder to join us next week for a talk with Rashad Tabakawala, author of Restoring the Soul of Business. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce our presenters today, Kristian Kruse and Chris Stevens.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Kristian Kruse, and thank you so much, Don and ThinkLA for inviting us to do this little webinar thing. Just a quick introduction, as you say, I'm a executive and team coach living in LA as well. I'm originally from Denmark, and kind of what as I say, the executive coach part is still pretty self-explanatory, but I work a lot with creative agency leaders and teams in order to create better clarity, communication, team performance, and action plan for how we can work better together. And more than ever now with our current situation in the world, there's a little bit more need for that clarity. So, but we're going to talk more about that today. Thanks.
And hello, everyone. I'm Chris Stevens. I've worked with Kristian in the past, and I've been running and advising high-growth digital product agencies and startups for the last 12 years, and optimizing and developing all aspects of their business operations. So, a little bit less on the people side than Kristian, and more on the tech and business operations side. So I will take you through the first half of our webinar today. So we're all working from home. Our teams are all distributed. Today, what we thought you might benefit from is a summary or a TDLR of all of the content that we've seen out there over the last week that might be pertinent to people in leadership roles. Then in the second half, we'll hopefully be able to throw the microphone over to you and hear back about your own experiences and learning. So things have looked a lot like this in the past week. We're all firing off Slack messages. We're putting fires out on video calls. You know, these images here are probably familiar to how you're working now and interacting with people. What me and Kristian have seen over the last week is, and I'm sure you guys as well, particularly on LinkedIn and Twitter, is a huge outpouring of remote guides where there's been a lot of great content out there. Mentally Friendly, a digital agency in Sydney, put out a great one on collaborating and working from home. Noble hosted a 6-hour virtual conference, which they put out on, which will hopefully put out on YouTube soon. And Bob Gower did a webinar on setting up remote teams, which he made available on YouTube just today. So these decks and slides, this deck and slides, you'll be able to download. There was a link at the beginning. There'll be a link at the end. All of these blue links, you can hyperlink out and have a look at those resources if you find them useful. We've also been reminded about all of the remote-friendly tools that we've become reliant on. A few new ones have popped up to me. Miro, a team whiteboarding online application. That was new to me. I'd recommend checking that out. Virtual kind of post-it note boarding. Additionally, we've also seen a lot of the best online classes go free. Nike have just released their entire premium app free as of yesterday, and there's been a lot of great mental health resources that are equally important out there as well. So unless you're lucky enough to work already for a remote company, a remote first company, it's been clear that collectively we're all adjusting to new ways of working. Before COVID-19, Buffer, one of the big social media management platforms out there that some of you probably use, produced a state of remote working in 2020. One of the biggest things that stood out to us was this question that they asked everyone, which was, what's your biggest struggle with remote working? back when they did this survey, people were struggling with collaboration and communication, loneliness, and not being able to unplug. Those were the kind of two big three things there. And there's a link out there if you want to go and have a look at the full report. So when putting this webinar together, we thought it would be a great thing if we threw that question back to you. So what's your biggest single challenge working remotely? Now I'll throw up a poll. Towards the end, we'll look at the results and discuss and hear back from you guys how you're solving those challenges within your organization. So let me just launch the poll now and give everyone a few minutes just to put some answers in. And see how the results come in. I'll do a reveal a little bit later. So we've got about half the people on the call voted so far. And now I will stop sharing my screen and throw over to Kristian, who will take over the next part of this presentation. Okay, a few stragglers.
Just need to unshare it, Chris. Sorry.
Okay, I'll end the poll there. And stop sharing your screen and over to you, Kristian.
Thank you. Yeah, so we're going to come back to that poll, and in general, I think there's going to be somewhat repetition of what I'm going to say over the next few slides, and kind of purposefully, because this is a lot about how we show up as leaders and how we can keep on clearly communicating what it is, you know, our teams need and what we need in this disruption age. Because one of the meta perspectives on this is, you know, how do we move forward? Like, we have all the infrastructure, right? Like, you know, everyone has been forced to create more remote settings. So now we're figuring out, like, are we joining Zoom? What are our platforms using and all that stuff? So the infrastructure is all about iteration. It's all about getting feedback over time. So the meta part is, like, we really need to figure out things in the first place. How do we show up as leaders to make this work? So we're forced in a situation where a lot of our leadership is exposed and how we communicate differently. But a lot of this, what we want to focus on is, it's always been this way. It's just a lot more exposed. And now we have to start making best practice as we go and learn from them. Sorry, there you go. I'm not going to show this video right now. A lot of you may have seen it already. This is Dr. Mike Ryan from the WHO Emergency Response Team. He's Program Executive Director. And the moral of the story in this little clip is, like, if you need to be right before you move, you never win. Perfection is the enemy of the good. And especially in our creative agency industry, we've known to hear a lot about iteration and constantly prototyping and so forth. But this also comes down to how we show up as leaders. This comes down to how we work with our teams and our organizations. And now more than ever, we just need to make stuff happen. So therefore, experiment, try out things, but make sure you really show up with a compassionate leadership full of asking questions and feedback. So how do we do it? Like, the obvious ones, like leading through trust. And trust is one of those words that means, if I ask all of you what trust means to you, we would get like X amount of different definitions of it. So, but trust is one of the things that we keep on hearing. We all hear that's the most important things, how we show up as leaders. Chris and I was actually on a call the other day where they were talking about a researcher, Karen Sobol-Lojetsky, who studied over 600 different remote teams, and the number one issue, or quality that was needed in order to mitigate issues on working remotely was trust. So this is not something new. Again, as I say, trust has always been one of those characteristics as leaders. How do we show up that? How do we build trust in our organization, in our team, and on an individual level? But again, now it's a lot more exposed because we are working in unfamiliar ways. A lot of us, we don't have the presence, the insight to see our coworkers. We, you we have to build more trust to our employees. Hemingway has a great quote that applies in this situation: is the best way to find out if you can trust somebody is to trust them. So we're not able to now look into how people are working in the office to monitor them. There's a lot more assume good intent to that people will show up. And we also at the same time, from a compassion and vulnerability level of us as leaders, need to show people are struggling. There's a lot of people who are uncertain, including ourselves, uncertain about what the future is bringing, or even how their home situation. Again, the clip you saw earlier with like your kids walking in, that's going to happen to all of us who have like kids and don't have childcare and so forth. Your dog that jumps on the bed, whatever. I'm working from my bedroom in situ, right? So it's like we all are in this situation together. So now there's a lot more compassion and having good intent of like, what are we trying to achieve, and be there for the people, be there for your team. So in general, like, when we hire people in our organization, people often join because of the culture. Like they come in, they talk to the people, they're excited to see your offices, they see like, or interview with people who are just really well spoken in terms of how you're working and what you're creating. So people really join for the culture, and then often they stay for the team. So when they start materialize their position and their connections and their community and their teams, that's often why they stay. And most of the times, unless it's like a geographical move, they leave because of their managers. Again, this is like studied over and over. So but the point being now is, again, coming back to the culture, a lot of this has been now exposed to like, what is our culture? Like, what does our values and purpose as a company mean? And one of the team exercises I do as a coach frequently is when I talk to, go into a company and work with a team and their team manager, their leader, is we start defining what is the company values. And a lot of the times, a lot of the companies have very, very similar values. And the thing, coming back to what I was saying with trust, we used to do an exercise. Back in the days when I was working in a company called Hyper Island, it's like we went around the room of a team, we put down the word digital. In this case, we can do it like communication. And we ask everyone to write down their definition of what that means. And what you get out of it is, again, if there's 10 people on the team, you will have 10 different type of definitions. So when we have the values and the purpose of a company, we need to figure out what does that mean to us on an individual level, and what does that mean for us as a team? Because that allows you as a manager to show up and understand, how are we working together, team? How can I lead my team in the best, most supportive way? Because we know what those values mean to each of them. That means people are asking for better, more clear communication. How do we communicate? Where do we communicate? So this is really important to start asking some of those questions. Again, there's a bunch of workshops out there. Again, the purpose of this one is not to go in like it. There's a lot of great people out there doing the remote guys and these things. You could look them up, but it's really to understand that there's some work in it for us as leaders to now say, how can we provide a safe environment full of trust that allows people to express themselves and give feedback? More on a more practical level, right? So we wanted to give a little bit of insight and something you can bring back to your team, and some thought starters and so forth, is what are some of the examples of trust building? Like, what are some of the things you can show up and do today? What is the most important thing I can do today for myself and my team? And again, we all have check-ins with our teams in different ways on our different cadences, but now because of the situation, like, make teams frequent, and if you have them frequent, up the frequency. So while that can talk a little, again, a lot of these practical examples can also go a little bit against what, like, if you follow Basecamp's rules for productivity, how you work, do the best work, there might be some conflict. And that's another, again, meta level conversation. It's like, there might be some tension in how some of these tips go over, but these are not rules. These are for you to take and figure out what works best for you and your team. And more importantly, it's all about asking for feedback, because it might not be the most productive thing to keep on checking in right now, but right now in the state we're in with all the uncertainty and fear that's happening around the world, people need to be heard, people need to be seen, people need to be allowed to be vulnerable, and that's how you show up as a leader. So again, up the frequency and check-ins, and then ask if there's anything your team individually and on a broader scale needs to do their home more effectively, working from more effectively from home. And that can be, again, coming back to, is that tools, is that to, they need a better office chair. Like, you know, we're now, you see a lot of companies now switching away from offices or rework spaces. So they have freed up a budget, so you can actually give some of the support people need, give them a proper webcam if they can, whatever it may be. But again, it's all about asking what your team needs, even if it's just to be heard or be connected to some, you know, if you have on staff like HR to have to talk through. So I was saying, great leaders promote vulnerability. Like, again, it's about walking the talk. So nobody's expected to, has never been, but more importantly now, it's not expected to have all the answers. As a leader, it's all about being a facilitator and collaboratively find them. We hire people for their mastery. We hire people for their expertise. We hire them for what they bring to the table. So this is an opportunity to really bring people more into that problem-solving process. And again, showing up as a vulnerable leader is not a bad thing. It's a strength, because that allows you to see people for who they are, what they can contribute with, and where you can learn something from them, and where you can teach them something, right? So it's okay not to have the answers. It's okay to find them out together. But what is really important is obviously you being very clear when you don't have the answer. So again, share what you know, but also make sure you ask the questions when you don't know. Listen more, talk less. It's a lot about active listening, practical. It's like, if you're talking more than 40% of a conversation, you're probably talking too much. Ask why, an open-ended question. And again, Chris linked to Bob Gower. It's like, there a lot of open-ended questions, and you're most likely familiar with open-ended questions, but since we're in a webinar, questions that cannot be answered with a yes or a no. So it's more why, how questions, not like if, so, and all that stuff. So ask questions that really let people bring out what they're thinking, let them roll with it, keep on asking in. It's like, what else? Delegate more and clearly. So what I mean by that is, so delegation, again, there's a lot of, you as a leader probably have a lot more on your plate right now, and emergency disaster stuff, and just communication with leadership and HR and people ops and facility, whatever it may be. In general, delegate, again, the tasks you can delegate to the people who can really rise to the occasion. This is also an opportunity for you to let people show that they are really, you know, you hire them for a reason. Like, people show up if you give them an opportunity for it. And the clear part is, again, you have to be excessively clear in this time of situation. It's like, we have so many platforms. We have, again, everyone's on Zoom. Zoom is doing great these times. Like, we have Slack, we have Basecamp, Microsoft Teams, whatever tools, email, we have all these tools, but it's really important that people hear what you're saying, and you check with them that you have been heard. So clearly communicate it. Make sure you get a buy-in that people have heard you. So like, make sure that are we managing expectations on what is needed from this delegation. Continue growth conversations. Growth conversations are important, again, for people to feel valued and worthy and heard. So again, like, don't hold off on these. There might be a different frequency and cadence of them. And again, that's where the over communication comes in. It's like, we are still going to have growth conversations, because in this situation, you are still going to grow as a person and as a team member. So again, really important that you don't push those off, because those are very, very valuable to also hear what your people need and where they are. Same thing with one-on-one check-ins. Communicate and clarify a little bit what I said before, but even more so is like, a lot more people are going to be on virtual meetings, and some people can't attend. Some people had to do something else. People can show up. People had like a kid crying, whatever it is. So right now in this case, it's really important that we follow up in a way, and we write like follow up in an email, follow up in a way that allows everyone to be on the same page. So again, this comes back to over communication. If you said it verbally right now, it's like, we might have heard it differently. We might have not understood it. The audio might have glitched, whatever it is. So be sure to follow up with your communication in writing. Again, this is one of those that can be on a longer term scale, you want to change, but right now, inclusion over exclusion. It's more important, again, that people feel they know what's going on in this uncertainty. So like let them include people in meetings much more than previously, and then ask again for feedback if this is working, not working. Set expectations to yourself and the team. Again, this is like coming back to this vulnerability of like, we don't know what's going on. So like, this is what I'm expecting to work on this week. This is what I'm expecting. This is the answer I'm expecting to get to you. Just be super clear on the expectation and share it. Show, really walk the talk and set yourself as an example what you want to see from your team and your company. Assume good intent. It's one of those things. We all are very good as humans to make intent and assume the worst. And I'm paraphrasing, but when we hear something, and it can even, if we hear a spoken word and we can interpret it in different ways, people will always default to the worst interpretation. So again, assume that people are doing good intent. People are really, again, trying. Some people are handling this more productively than others, more better, whatever it may be, but assume good intent. We're all in this together. And this, again, these rules, some of these rules do apply always assume a good intent. Nice little Twitter thing we saw, like I just heard from a French friend that a director is setting up an 8-hour mandatory video call for her so she can watch her people work. Yeah, don't do that. This is not about, so when we're using these tools and this thing of communication up to frequency, it's not to monitor people. This is much more about allowing people to be heard and share work and so forth. So now, before, a lot of people, because of our devices and again these tools we're using, work-life synergy, as Warren Buffett told it, versus work-life balance, is becoming a lot more fluid. Like again, my best example, we're all sitting probably at home, hopefully, and that means fluidity between when are we off and when we're on is now a lot more harder to distinguish. So some of the things, again, tips, you might have seen them out there, but again, keep and develop rituals. It's all about a rhythm. So, you know, you go to work, commute, like you shower, you get up, you get dressed, and you don't have to wear exactly the same clothes you wear at work, but start a ritual. You know, commute now means if you have an opportunity to take a walk around the block, great, do it. If you read a little bit, do a podcast and exercise. Again, mental health, physical health is really, really important. Manage your calendar for your own sake and your team. Again, it's one of those things, like a lot of companies do have shared calendars, and again, people have a tendency to fill up calendars where they have a gap. So allow yourself to give that time to block off calendar for work. And again, as a leader, this is where it's important. You have to model the behavior. Have you allowed your team to take time to work, right? So are you allowing people to block off calendars so they can have that time? Some companies are now doing, they can only book meetings in a certain amount of slots during the day. So there is a forced time where people can actually just sit down and work or get lunch or take a walk or exercise, whatever it is. But again, you as a leader in your company, you are setting the example and you can actually set the rules a lot of times. So make sure you're being very intentional about, are you allowing people to do work as well? The go-to from and work, again, when I leave here, go upstairs, like that's my way of leaving work. So again, I'll be very clear, intentional about like allow people to shift their mindset around this. This means also like Slack has do not disturb features, and it's by default from like 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., which is, I don't know companies who work like that. Like you start setting it like people get off work at 5 p.m. and they start work at 9 p.m. You can set those default ranges. A lot of these tools allow for it. If you don't have a tool that has that feature, how are you going to communicate how you're going to work in this time? Because people will default into being heard, being seen, which means they will overdo work. So you have to be there and build this psychological safety that people are okay to take time off, and especially under these stressful times. Turn off notifications as much as possible is a general life hack trick. We need more of that. So find a way, again, that allow people, this is also for focused work. So as a leader, how can you allow people to say like, hey, this is your time, don't let anyone interfere with you? And then how do you get a hold of people if there's an emergency? Just a question you can pose, again, when you're checking with your team, like ask yourself, how will I protect myself from feeling lonely or isolated and stay healthy, productive, and vibrant? Again, we're all in different situations and we all have different needs. So again, communication, come back to talk about what is needed from your team and how can you give them that support. And again, also very important, you as an individual, what is really important to you, right? So what do you need to show up to have a boundary, to not feel isolated? Like, I am here with my family, other people are alone. Like, what is it you need in that situation to feel lonely or not overstimulated and like exhausted from having all that? So again, communication, talk to your team, ask questions, be curious, and ask for what's, again, coming back to, ask for feedback. What is working? What is not working? Again, as I say, has it been more 2 hours talking to someone? Connect with a friend or a colleague. Again, create Slack channels for that. Like, if you have it, like a random dip in, we can talk about, Chris and I are part of a massive Slack community where there's a channel called Chairs, and you can talk about chairs if you want. Like, facilitate. Again, you as a leader are a facilitator. Facilitate communication work, and what are the opportunities you can create for your team to connect when they want, on their permission, right? So create Slack channels, create open style forum Zoom channels where people can go in and talk. Again, this is what people ask, what people need. Again, so and that's why, and check in with your team and share best practices. Again, you might learn from team to team. Again, if you're running a team versus a company, make sure that these are shared. They can be shared, again, through different tools. They can be shared in town halls, whatever it is. But again, we're making this up as we go. And this is more, again, in this situation, like, if you see a decrease in communication in a channel or on email or something, investigate with the intent of figuring out what's going on. Do not investigate in terms of like, oh, we're not being productive. Investigate from a human empathy perspective, like, what is going on? So ask questions, figure out, talk to the teams, like, hey, is everyone on track? Does anyone need anything? Again, these can come out of your check-ins, but it could also be a sign that people are missing something, or there's something they're not clear about. So again, as a leader, over investigate with good intent. And investigation then means like, inquire with curiosity. Like, you have to be radical curious about everything from a good intent perspective. So look into what's happening, see the patterns, and see if the pattern, and ask questions about if those patterns are going in a way that seems not very productive, or can be a sign of something else. So new ways of working, some more practical tips as well in terms of how we can lead these distributed teams. Jess Greenwood, from the CMO of RGA, says, again, we're coming to communication, timely and often beats comprehensive detail, especially when we have to do a lot of communication and people have a lot of questions about the uncertainty. In any team setting, any company setting, set ground rules. Again, turn on your camera. This is one of the things where people are really able to connect, and it does make a huge difference. There's a different way people are interacting and engaging when we can see each other. This shouldn't be new, and it doesn't mean that every meeting has to be a Zoom meeting. There's a lot of people need the exercise, or they think better when they're walking. So people can set up the ground rules of what works. So like, I love to do walk and talks on the phone, but it depends on what intent and what desired outcome you have of that call. Like, what are you expected to walk away with? If you're trying to run through a project plan, a walk and talk might not be the best because you can't have it in front of you. But if you're talking about checking how people are doing, it might be a different thing. So again, set ground rules of like, what type of meetings require what. But camera is a good one, and we have virtual backgrounds if we're feeling a little embarrassed about our backgrounds, or we want to show something, or just have a little fun. It doesn't matter, again. But again, talk to your team, figure out what works. As I say, a lot of repetition, because assume good intent, ask for clarity and feedback. Don't make any assumptions. Like, this is the danger zone of how we can suddenly think ill about our behavior, or about coworker because they said something in a tone, in a message. And again, I'm from Denmark. I've been dealing with a lot of ESL, like English as a second language, of using words in Danish, like translated to English, and to have a very different perception over here. So you might have a multicultural workforce and team structure. So words means different things to different people. So again, clear communication and assume good intent. And if you don't know what people meant, ask to clarify, ask for feedback. This is the other one with tools. We've been talking, Slack and Zoom and whatnot. Set expectation, align on tools where information lives and working hours. Like, so what is work hours, as we talked about earlier, also with do not disturb, but where information lives, again, not to use Slack as the example, not every piece of information should exist in Slack, right? So documentation might be more applicable to a Confluence or Google Doc page that you can link to. A planning document is Excel based. A instant communication thing, that is Slack. Like a meeting is on Zoom. So again, find out where you want to convey what type of information and apply that, again, now more organizational scale. Where does information live? Because a lot of us have now had to adopt tools we didn't use in the past. We might have had them in our portfolio, but we didn't use them. Now we have to have much more clear intention about it. So ask yourself, what information am I trying to communicate with this piece? So where would it best live? And again, you as leaders are able to make those decisions on a hierarchy level. Repeat to succeed. Make sure that people have heard you and that they're okay with the outcome. There's a great little article. I'm not going to go too much into that, so you can link to that and read it. And feedback. Do a lot of feedback sessions, whether that start, stop, continue, whether it is what I appreciate about you, what I would like to see more of. Make it constructive, but ask for feedback. Make sure you are encouraging feedback on a much more, not only on a one-on-one you as a leader, but your team individually, like with each other, across teams, whatever it is. So encourage feedback. It is essential. It has always been, but now even more so, it's much more exposed. Again, encourage conversation might be one of those things, especially in the beginning, for people to connect in the situation we're in right now. So urge public conversations in your tools. We used, again, coming back to Basecamp is a big, their philosophy is a lot about like, we can't have a lot of DMs because not everyone needs to like constantly have this like neuroticism about notifications popping up and not being able to follow a conversation. But right now, bring the conversation when it benefits everyone in the work. Don't back channel. Try to bring those conversations out in the open so people understand what's going on. And again, there's sensitive information, there's sensitive conversation. Those are obviously meant to be private, but anything that benefits the work of the people involved around the team, bring that out in the open so people feel heard and they understand what's going on. So again, default to including, people over excluding, encourage to over communicate. I said that now 100 times, so it's important. And again, one of the create opportunities for people just to connect. And again, there's a lot of different tools. So you should talk to your people ops, your HR team, or everyone has a great, a person in the company who always have the great ideas on how to get people to talk and connect. Ask them. If you use Slack, Donut is one of those tools, integrations, who can just connect randomly to people around the company and make them start talking, not only across your team, but a wider organization. So bunch of tools out there, bunch of frameworks, there's a lot of things, but ask your team what they have as suggestions. Again, especially because of this, there's a lot of communication happening around an uncertainty, have hours every day where your HR, people ops team, and leadership are available for just an open Zoom room. Everyone can join and just ask questions. And again, come back to tell them when you have an answer, tell them. If you don't have an answer, tell them you don't have it, but also when you're expecting to and deliver on that promise. It's really important that you, again, deliver on your promise of I don't have the answer for you right now, but I will by this time. So again, super clear, super confident. And again, coming back to us as leaders, this is about the calm and confident. That doesn't mean we have to have the answers, but calm and confident allows for vulnerability. On a more team basis, again, daily, we talked about it, is a daily stand-ups you need. Start with quick check-ins. Is a great little guy from Nobel. It's what the first question you're bringing with me is what am I bringing with me today? So again, a great little article to how you can foster some psychological safety. It's all about cognitive offloading and anticipating miscommunications, but a great little article. So, and again, a check-in is all about what will you work on today? What did you work on yesterday? What do you work on today? What will you work on tomorrow, potentially? And again, any blockers, so what do you need help with right now? Again, talk to your team, figure out what works, but build a framework that you can use. Weekly planning, again, we are doing this differently. So figure out what works on a weekly basis, monthly retros with your team, do project retros, proper kickoffs, proper retros. As you said, up your frequency with one-on-ones, really talk to people, hear where they are in their state. Listen, ask it, open-ended questions. The open-ended questions, also a bunch of great ones from Bob Gower, Rebar, and leave time between meetings. We're all stuck in our chair right now. And again, coming back to what we said earlier about calendars, manage your calendar on an organizational scale, so people are allowed to go out and have a walk, have lunch, do an exercise, whatever. If you just sit back to back to back, you're going to be incredibly exhausted, and that's not going to be productive or beneficial and for anyone on your team, and it's just going to increase the level and anxiety and uncertainty. A great meeting framework, a lot of people might know it already. Again, this is more as a practical, every meeting should have a structure, and this is one of the really good ones. A lot of people know audio art, but there's an extra R in the revised version. So again, before you schedule a meeting, what is your intention of this meeting? Why are we having it? Like, who is supposed to show up? Decide outcomes. What are we expecting to walk away with? Again, coming back to be very clear why we have having this meeting and what we want people to walk away with. The agenda, so what do we need to walk through in order to get to that desired outcome? Roles. One thing we talk a lot about is like, depending on your team structure and your company and so forth, have a facilitator. That can be someone from another team. It could be someone from your team who's not directly involved with that meeting, but a facilitator, especially now with our tools, allows us to make sure we're hitting on time, we're going through all the topics, we let everyone talk. And again, you as a leader should encourage everyone to speak up, right? So especially newer people or people who are more introverted are now, we like to hear ourselves talk. So make sure that everyone has been able to, again, show up, build that psychological safety, that feedback input is encouraged from everyone. So who's facilitating, who's documenting meeting notes, again, coming up with, like we talk about this, send out the email afterwards with this framework, and also what were the outcomes, what are our action plans, who's responsible for what. Rules, again, we're used to sitting in a meeting conference room, and half the people sit on their phones, or their laptops might be doing something else. So again, now we're forced to be on computers and phones. What are the rules we want as a team? Again, coming back to ground rules, like how do we, because if I need to sit and write note, I will be in a different app. Zoom had gotten a little bit of criticism that you can do attention tracking, which means you can see when people are not looking at the presentation on Zoom. But that could be because I'm doing meeting notes, right? So assume good intent, but also create some rules that work for your team of how you want to be present, how you want to show up, and how people are taking ownership of this. Time, practical. If we're expecting 1 hour, finish in 1 hour. Again, bunch of resources. We shared them, I think actually Don has shared some of these with you earlier. Again, great resources, look them through, figure out what works for you, talk to your team. Yeah, we're gonna jump back to our poll results. So I'm gonna hand it over to you, Chris. Do you want me to keep the presentation?
I'll take over. I'll start sharing my screen.
Cool.
Just give me 1 second. There we go. So collected the results. Now let's look at the poll results and see what we came up with. So people are really struggling with collaboration and communication and not being able to unplug. Those are the two big areas. Now let me bring up the participants window. Does anyone want to raise their hand? And I'll throw the microphone over to them to talk a little bit about how they might be tackling collaboration and communication within their organization. Do you have any volunteers that want to raise their hand? No? No one wants to speak? Okay. So here we go. We got one. Everyone's shy. It's in the chat there. Okay, I mean, Kristian, we went through quite a few examples there. Does anyone have anything where they want to raise their hand and talk about how they might tackle not being able to unplug?
Or even how they're doing it.
Philip suggested my challenge is being distracted by non-work stuff. Kristian, how do you manage your distractions around?
So I think it's there's two parts. One is like one of the two elements: compassion and ground rules. So ground rules sound so strict, but we're all working here. Like my wife, I have a 3-year-old who loves to interact and I love to interact with, but what are the ground rules? We say, like, if I have to be on an important call, I try to talk to my wife and figure out, like, what are the ground rules we can set? Again, so you with your team, even you with your family, it's like, how can I ensure that I have time to do these things? Then there's other flexibility. So this call right now is really important to me. Therefore, I have a ground rule with my wife taking my daughter and they're out playing outside in the front yard kind of thing. But be very clear of what you need with your partner if you have one, of what you need and when they need it. And again, this is about the empathy of like understanding. And at the second part, the compassionate part and empathy part is, yes, my daughter Coco might walk in, and that's okay. You know, we're all doing our best we can. We are confined to our homes and so forth. So again, allow for us to be humans, to just show up and say, like, hey, you're gonna meet Coco for 2 minutes. This also allows me to connect with you on you're seeing my family, because again, when we're in a workspace, a lot of us don't see each other for who we are as persons. And again, from a cultural perspective, there's a strong separation of like who you are as a person at work and who you are as a person at home. And we're all the same person. So now it allows you to show up as who you are as a human. So again, set ground rules with your on a practical level in your household of like what that means and what you need and what they need, from timings to meetings to work hours. And then secondly, just, you know, we're all in this together. If your dog comes in, your family comes in, that might happen sometimes. And then more practically, like if it's more on a productivity level in terms of like, we all get distracted, you know, and you can do this again pre-COVID. Like if you're not good at like separating those two things already, there might be, you know, we're always distracted by devices and platforms and everything. Start being more intentional. Like, these are my work hours. This is when I work. Put your phone in another room, all those things. Like, try to set up your space as much as you can, under limitations, to how is this, again, what is my intention? How is this going to serve me? So if you don't need your phone for the next hour of work, put it in a different room, turn off notifications. If there's something that can wait, that's why it's also like, just plan out your day more deliberately.
How about you, Don? Do you have any thoughts on the ThinkLA's team around this?
Sure. Actually, we've been, you know, our executive director, Susan Franceschini, is very cognizant of mindfulness about mindfulness, and has been phenomenal in terms of making sure we are getting up every hour, taking a lunch break, starting off your day with exercise or yoga or meditation. And I really feel that the team has embraced that. And I think it's led to a lot more balance. And I know that there are a lot of times when we all have realized we are completely knackered by the end of the day, and it's just time to sign off. So I think checking in with the team about balance and what they need, and as you were saying earlier, being very cognizant of where they are and where they might be, I think that communication goes a long way toward providing that balance.
Great. Thanks, Don. So I will pass back over to you. Thanks everyone. Wash your hands, and I will we will circulate the deck. People can jump into it through the link that we shared at the beginning. We'll circulate that again, and over to you, Don. Thanks for hosting me and Kristian.
Absolutely, and thank you both so much for this phenomenal information. Thank you for your expertise. I want to thank everybody who attended today. We'll have this recording and the deck available on the same site where you registered.